Okay, I'm back, and I'm going to read going to start reading Henri Bergson and his essay. It's hard to choose one thing by Bergson to read, but I'm going to read uh, his essay, which is entitled "The Body and the Mind," or "The Body and the Soul." I- Um, Actually, I think that soul is different than spirit, so maybe it is body and the body and the soul. Maybe that's the actual French, from French to English translation. At any rate, I'm going to read that, and I'm going to stop probably at some points and kind of summarize or explain what Bergson is talking about at certain junctures if I think that it's um, starting to get thick uh, for people who are unacquainted with his work. And also, um, I might stop if I get fatigued and I feel that the reader is probably getting fatigued. Um, I'm going to try to articulate his words so that in the in the way that I think he's trying to get his thought and the movement of his thought across to the reader, to the listener in this case. So anyway, just be prepared for that. And it's really a long essay, so I don't know if I'm going to complete it. I might read it over several. It might take me. It's going to take me like many recordings if I do the whole thing. But I might skip around. I might take pauses and breaks and detours and stuff. So just like life for Bergson. Um, okay, so this is a lecture that he delivered in Paris on April 28th, 1912. It's called The Soul and the Body. So he says, the subject of my lecture is the soul and the body. When I say when I say that, by this I mean matter and mind, you may fear that I'm about to embark on a general disquisition concerning all that exists, and even, it may be, a great deal that does not exist. But be reassured, it is not my intention to try to discover the fundamental nature of matter, no, much less the fundamental nature of mind. It is possible to distinguish two things from one another, and to a certain point to determine their relations without needing to know the nature of each of them. It is impossible for me at this moment to be acquainted with all the people around me. Yet I distinguish myself from them and also see the place they occupy in relation to me. So in the case of the body and the soul, to define the essence of each would be a long and arduous undertaking, but it is easier to know what unites and what separates them, for their union and separation are facts of experience. First, then, what does the simple and direct experience of common sense tell us on this point? Each of us, each of us is a body, subject to the same laws as all other portions of matter. When pushed, we advance; when pulled, we recoil; when lifted up and let go, we fall. But besides these movements, which are mechanically provoked by an external cause, there are others which seem to come from within, and which cut across the first kind by their unforeseen character. They are called voluntary. What is the cause of them? It is what each of us denotes by the words I or me. And what is the I? Something which appears, rightly or wrongly, to overflow every part of the body which is joined to it, passing beyond it in space as well as in time. In space, for the body of each of us is confined within the distinct surfaces which bound it, whilst by our faculty of perception, and more especially of seeing, we radiate far beyond our bodies and even to the stars. He's saying that you can basically the light you're connected to the light in the stars because it hits your eye. Uh, so he says, and again, so the original his original thing was what is the eye? He says that it is something which appears, rightly or wrongly, to overflow beyond the body in space as well as in time. In space, for the body of each of us is confined within the distinct surfaces which bound it, whilst by our faculty of perception, and more especially of seeing, we radiate far beyond our bodies and even to the stars. And in time, for the body is matter, matter is in the present. And if it be true that the past leaves there traces of itself, they are not traces of the past except for a consciousness perceiving them and interpreting what it perceives by the light of what it remembers. So he's saying that basically memory, we transcend the present because we have memory and we endure into the future, from the past into the future. And he says that this consciousness retains the past. So the consciousness, that is I, it retains the past, enrolls what time unrolls, and with it prepares a future which it will itself help to create. So this consciousness retains the past, it enrolls what time unrolls, and with it, with the past, we prepare a future which we ourselves help to create. Indeed, the voluntary act of which I have just spoken, oh dear. Okay. Indeed, the voluntary act of which I have just spoken is nothing but a group of movements learnt in previous experience and inflected in a direction each time new by a conscious force whose main purpose appears to be the ceaseless bringing of something new into the world. Yes, it creates something new outside itself, since it outlines in space unforeseen, unforeseeable movements. So initially he talked about matter and how we are matter and we are governed by external causes, uh, being pushed and pulled and dropped. We're subject to all the same laws that matter is subject to. But he says consciousness has this ability to retain the past and project into the future. And at least it's not always doing this, but it does have the capability. A lot of times we act by habit and mechanical sort of material reflexes, which are in the spinal cord and the brain. But he says that it can create something new outside of itself, since it outlines in space unforeseen and unforeseeable movements, whereas causal laws are, governed, strictly determined. Consciousness can do unforeseeable and unforeseen movements, can create them. And also, it creates something new inside itself, since the voluntary action reacts on him who wills it, modifies in some degree the character of the person from whom it emanates, and accomplishes by a kind of miracle that creation of self by itself which seems to be the very object of human life. So again, he says, we not only create something new outside of ourselves through our actions, but doing this in turn also creates something new inside of ourselves, since voluntary action, when we do it, when we act, it also reacts on the person who's willing it, who's willing the act, and it modifies in some degree the character of the person from whom it emanates, and accomplishes by a kind of miracle that creation of self by itself, which seems to be the very object of human life. All right, I kind of set up my timer in a weird way, so I'll continue this reading, which we haven't gotten very far in, but I think it's interesting how he starts off making these distinctions very clearly, I think, and we'll continue it in the next video.